All right, so this is a guide to writing a DBQ. This is for any of the AP history courses. I'm going to focus on Euro for this one. This is September, late September of 23. So I'm assuming the College Board isn't going to change anything on us moving forward. So DBQ is an acquired skill, and it's one that takes practice. The skills we utilize in analyzing DBQ are the same ones historians use when analyzing documents and writing history. That's one of the reasons why I actually like the DBQ, and one of the ways I'm going to teach how to write it and how to analyze it, because it's the skills of historians. Well, we learn these skills to be better historians. Will along the way develop the ability to dominate the DBQ on the AP exam. On the actual exam, the DBQ will be on topics only from 1600 to 2001, and it counts for a quarter of your total score. You get a 15-minute planning period, then you get 45 minutes to write. Don't get discouraged if you don't get it right away. The goal is to improve throughout the year and learn to do the work of historians. What we're going to do in this video is we're going to go through kind of step-by-step, what are the points, how do you get these, what are the categories, and then we're going to take a look at the actual process of writing the DBQ. Then we'll look at some last-minute tips. So, first of all, the DBQ is out of 7 points. There's 4 categories that you have to demonstrate mastery of. The first one is contextualization. So contextualization situates the argument by explaining broader historical events or developments relevant to the question. So this is big picture. So this is starting very broad out here and bringing it in. You have to use info not found in the docs, and you're linking broader events directly to the question. You should be looking to 4 to 5 sentences here. One way to think about this is how and why did the question happen then? Another way to think about it, relate the topic to the prompt, topic of the prompt to the events, developments, and processes that occur around the same time frame of the question. So I think of this when you're watching a show and you haven't checked in on it in a couple weeks and you don't remember what happened, and you have to watch the recap from the previous episode. But sometimes the recap isn't just the previous episode, it's also like things that happened in other previous episodes that you'll need to know for this one. So it's like previously on The Last Kingdom, and that gives you that kind of idea. Another way of looking at contextualization is to think of it, if the DBQ you're reading is about one topic, about the peasant revolt, say, hypothetically, what chapter is that topic in? It's one little section in a chapter. What's the chapter that's in? So the point is not awarded for merely a phrase or reference. Again, I would plan 4 to 5 sentences. And in those 4 to 5, you should have a linking sentence that connects your contextualization to your thesis. So you're starting very broad, describing the chapter, describing previously, bringing it in with the linking sentence, and then boom, here's your thesis, your one sentence that we're going to get to right now. Okay, so for your thesis, you must have a clear, one sentence, explicit, historically defensible thesis that answers all part of the questions. You need to either have it either in the intro or the conclusion. One thing they really want you to do is take a stand on your argument. If it's asking for the most significant impact, give them the most significant impact. If it's asking if it was more religious or political, take a stand. It was more religious. We'll go into also how to say it also was political, but take a stand. Your thesis may not simply restate the question. It can't just be rewording it in the statement of fact. And also, I want you to use a sprite as a potential starting point just to organize your thoughts. A sprite is a way when you're breaking down the documents, which we're going to go into in a minute here, or when we get into the actual writing process, of just organizing the documents. A sprite stands for artistic, social, political, should be using abbreviations, religious, intellectual, a really great abbreviation for that one, technological, and economic. And again, this is just a starting point. This is only a way to pre-group your documents before breaking them down into ways that answer your question. You're just kind of thinking like, what is this document telling me in your first go-through? And your thesis can never be, there was social, political, and economic. That's not a thesis. Your thesis must develop an argument that recognizes historical complexity by placing the documents in groups that directly answer the question. So your thesis is going to divide your answer into groups and make your paragraph. Again, when we go into and talk about breaking down the documents, you're looking for ways to group them into groups of 2 or 3. Those groups are going to be your thesis. It's going to organize your thesis, and that's going to organize your entire essay. So those are the first 2 tasks, contextualization and thesis. The third one is evidence. Now this is up to 3 points. Points 1 and 2 are related. So basically points 1 and 2 are like, if you did it okay, or if you did it well, then beyond the docs is a separate skill. So for 1 point, you need to use the content of at least 3 documents to address the topic of the prompt. So 3 documents to make your argument. You can't just laundry list the documents. You can't just say in documents 1, 6, and 5, they did this. That's not counts as using the documents. You have to use your analysis to support your thesis. Support your analysis. The analysis is the how and why. What is going on? And then you must describe, not simply quote, the content from at least 3 of those docs. Then you want to utilize the content for the second point of at least 4 of the 7. So you only need to use another doc to get 1 more point using 4 of the 7. But then you have to do all of these for those 4 of 7. By the way, spoiler alert, we're going to talk about this. You're going to use all of the documents. Now, beyond the docs is a totally separate skill. So this is using the documents to support your argument here. Beyond the docs is using at least 1 additional piece of specific or historical evidence that's not found in the documents that's relevant to your argument about the prompt. So it must be connected to the DBQ topic and fit in one of your groups. It has to fit in one of your paragraphs. You need to explain the relevance to this. It's a well-developed example in one of those body paragraphs. So if we think about each document passage, every time you use a document, is probably 4 sentences, 5 sentences. That's how much this beyond the doc you should be looking at also. It's that well-developed of a point. And it must be more than a phrase of reference, and it'd be different to you from the point you use to earn contextualization. You can't double dip. You can't use the same thing for contextualization that you use for beyond the docs. So this is something that isn't in the documents that proves your argument. Next, we're going to talk about analysis and reasoning. These are 2 separate tasks, so there's 2 completely separate things. The first one is what I call point of view more often than not, what we're trying to call captoning the documents. Okay, this is your deep dive analysis. You're going to explain how or why the author's point of view, author's purpose, historical context, and our audience is relevant to your argument for at least 4, you'll see that there, at least 4 of the documents. But we're going to say do 5. The reason we say 5 is because if you only do 4 and you donkey one, you mess one up, then you won't get what you're looking for. You won't get the point that you're looking for. So we're saying do 5. So 5 of the 7 documents they're doing. So how does that look like? This is captone that some of you are familiar with. Captone is another acronym. We've got context, author, that's not true, audience, purpose, point of view, and tone. I think the audience and purpose are very closely related here. Because those are going to be very peas in a pod as far as why are they doing this and who are they doing this in front of. And then tone. Tone is the attitude of the document. Is it sarcastic? Is it pleading? Is it desperate? Is it angry? What is the tone of it? Now, CORNPEG is another acronym. Again, you don't need to memorize these acronyms, but they're helpful to have in the back of your head when we're learning how to do this process. Captone is just about the author of the document, Cornpeg. Cornpeg is just about the author of the document, who's speaking, who wrote it. And so different ways to think about this. It is the acronym, it stands for class, occupation, which are closely related, religion, which is especially relevant at the beginning of this course, nationality, politics. The E can stand for a few things. The biggest, some people say it's economics, but I think class covers that. Some people say it's ethnicity, but I think nationality covers that. I go with education sometimes for that. And then gender. I want to real quick go back to the point of view here on Captone and just talk about it briefly. We'll talk about it more in class. The best way to think about point of view is how who someone is impacts what they say. How who they are impacts what they say. It's not what they say, it's not who they are, it's how those work together. So just keep that in mind. So that's one task of analysis and reasoning. You do that for 5, you get 1 point, and actually potentially another. The next one is complex understanding. So this is what the College Board keeps changing on us. So complex understanding demonstrates a complex understanding of the historical development that is the focus of the problem, using evidence to corroborate, qualify, modify, or modify an argument that addresses the question. So the way I think of complex understanding is you're going beyond the question. So you have a whole essay, you start with the context that sets up your essay, that leads into your essay linking sentence thesis. You have paragraphs that are making your argument. You have one bit of evidence that isn't in the document that still makes your argument. Complex understanding goes beyond that. Complex understanding is saying, you know what, there's more to this than just that. One of the ways I think about complex understanding is if you've ever watched a documentary. Say you watch a documentary on Jack the Ripper. And the whole documentary is about Jack the Ripper and the murders and the victims and the police search and everything like that. And then like the last 2 minutes of the documentary, the host gets real dramatic and turns to the camera and says, what could Jack the Ripper teach us about modern day serial killers? Forensic scientists have, and like he goes into this whole thing and there's clips and stuff like that. And it's not related to the thesis of the show. It's not about the crux of the show, but it's going beyond and making a connection to it. Okay? So, in order to earn the complex understanding point, an idea must be well developed in more than a phrase or reference. There are multiple ways we are going to achieve this task, and we're going to focus on the acronym BMCT75. I know it's not real catchy, but if you just say it a couple times, it'll stick there. BMCT75. All right. So it stands for both multiple, connections thematic, 7 docs used, and 5 haptones. Okay? 5 captones, because it's for context. So, both. This is one of the big ones. Okay? If the question says, describe the causes of the age of imperialism, and you talk about both the causes and effects. If it says, describe the most common the most significant similarities between these two things. You talk about similarities and difference. Was the 30 Years' War primarily political, but it was also religious? Which one was it? You talk about both. So that's both. Multiple, this is also a big one. You're going to explain multiple causes, effects, changes. If the question asks for the most significant difference between these two events, you're going to describe the most significant difference, but then you're going to say there was also this difference. So that's the multiple. You're doing more than just one. So both multiple, one of those would be enough to do to get complex understanding. Other ways to do it, connections. Draw a connection between other time periods or geographic region. So the question, you build this whole argument about whatever the question is about trade in the Atlantic world, And then you're going to say, but you know what? It was also this way here at this point in time. Or it was also this way here in this geographic region. So the geographic regions that we're allowed to use and the times that we're allowed to use, since we're just European history here, a lot of times there'll be a difference between East and West, or even North and South Europe. Here's how, if the question is just about Russia, you could say, but in Western Europe, this is the way it went. So first dividing Europe, okay? You can also do Europe chronologically in a different time period, okay? So time period Europe. Then you can do the world is the next level. So if you can't think of anything to make connections to in just Europe, you can do world history. If you can't think of anything in world history, then it gets really weak. You can do American history. Okay? If you can't think of anything for anything and you feel you have to do a connection, you can't think of Europe, world, America, then you can do the Nazis. Because everybody always tries to connect everything to the Nazis. Even though it's not actually accurate, but like, okay. I think the biggest thing you need to be worried about is don't be just a single brief reference here. Another way to do this, so we have both and multiple, kind of go together, same ideas, just got to do one. Connections is another way. Thematic, if the question is strictly about political changes, can you bring in social changes? Can you bring in economic changes? Another one of our themes, another one of our A-sprites, if you will. Okay? Another way to get this complex understanding point is to use all 7 documents. We're just going to do that every time. We're going to seal the deal. We're going to make sure we get it, even regardless of all these other things. And then you're going to do haptone for 5 documents. We already talked about this. College Board requires 4 for the point, but we're going to do 5. You only need to do one of these to get the point. One of any of these things. Okay, but we are going to do either A or B, or C or D, but every time we are going to do E and F. So we're going to do one of these 4, most likely A or B, and then E and F every time. It's just better writing. One of my problems with the recent College Board changes is it weakens the writing, it weakens the historical analysis. We are going to write better. Plus, if you want to be completely cynical about it, you're just sealing the deal that you're getting that 7th point, getting that complex understanding point. All right, next we're going to talk about steps for completing a DBQ. So this is the actual process you're going to go through when you're writing a DBQ. So the first part is pre-writing. You are going to get 15 minutes to pre-write. That's what the College Board gives you. That's what they expect. And I want you to use it. I want you to use the full 15 minutes. If not even more, use it, use it, use it. First thing you need to do is read the question carefully. Ask yourself, what are they asking me to accomplish? Be sure to know whether the question has several parts. Is it political and social? Is it comparing and contrasting? What is it asking you to do? Identify the parameters of the question. What's the time period, social classes, political, economic, but not social? What's it asking you to do? Make sure you know the historical thinking skill. Is it causation? Is it continuity and change over time? Or is it comparison? You have to know what you're answering. You have to know the task they're asking you to do before you can put together your thesis. One of the biggest points that I can just drive home, no matter how hard I can try it, I want to keep saying it more and more. Many students who fail in the DBQ do so because they fail to answer the question. They answer the question they feel like answering or they thought they should answer, and not necessarily the one that they should be answering. Next step is to think about potential groups that may answer the question before looking at the documents. Oh, I don't know what that was. So just after you read the question, just take 30 seconds. What could I use to answer this question? How would I answer this question if it was just an LEQ, if it was just a straight essay? Next thing you're going to do is analyze the documents. This is the biggest part of your pre-planning here, of your pre-writing. I call this breaking down the docs. You're going to go through and read each document carefully. You're going to make notes next to each, including relevant info like A-sprite, the content of the document, the purpose, the audience, bias, point of view. What is it getting at? How does this document answer the question? This is one of the most important parts of the writing process here. Now, you're not going to write every one of those down for every single document, but that's what you're thinking about as you're going through. You're then going to create a tentative group chart based on the question. So that's going to start putting these documents into groups. As part of your pre-writing, I want you to take a minute to figure out what your contextualization will be. And an example of beyond the docs. You don't have to write it fully out, but what would you use just in shorthand? What are you going to use? So when you get to writing your essay, you already have those thought out. And then lastly, before you begin writing, reread the question again. Does your outline, does everything you just did there cover the question completely? Did you use at least 6 of the documents? Did you use all 7 of the documents? Because that's what we want you to do. Now, writing the DBQ. This is the biggest part of one of the toughest parts here, 45 minutes writing. So, first thing, you're going to do introduction. Your introduction, the bulk of which is your contextualization. It's 4 to 5 sentences, including your linking sentence, starting broad, coming in here. The last sentence should be your thesis statement. I guess it doesn't have to be a single sentence, but it really can be and should be most of the time. So you're writing contextualization, thesis statement. Boom, done with intro. Your body paragraphs. This is where you're really doing the document part of the DBQ. You should always have a topic sentence that relates directly back to your thesis. If your thesis is the most significant causes were X, Y, and Z, the first sentence of your first body paragraph is one significant cause was X. Make a roadmap for the reader. Make it real easy to see what you're doing and what you're trying them to see. Try to get them to see. Your evidence, you should always refer back to the documents and depend heavily on them. This is a document-based question. Lean on the documents. And don't forget, you are using all 7 of the documents. So using the documents, I call this the document package. So every time you use a document, you are going to explain how the document supports your argument. That's 2-ish sentences. How does this document fit into your bigger picture? Then you're going to do the analysis, okay? Explain how the source's captones might affect a source's meaning. Describe relative historical significance, a source's point of view, purpose, historical situation, and or audience, credibility, and or limitations. This is 2-ish of the sentence. This is 2-ish sentences. Doing this for everyone, or doing this for 5 of the documents, okay? Make sure you identify the document by using the author's name and document number at some point. So that the reader cannot help but notice your use of the doc. I call this setting off the doc. So you'd say Pope Pius, Doc 2, showed disdain for Bismarck and whatever you're saying. Okay, just make sure it's clear that you're using the document. Do not quote the document at length. Paraphrase the documents in your own words by using the key terms and key ideas of the document. The readers have these documents memorized. They don't want to read a whole bunch of sentences that are just you rewriting it out, so then you're wasting time. Paraphrase, show them you know what it means. Okay? So that's using the documents. Now, also in your body paragraph is beyond the docs. Okay? Beyond the docs, again, provides an additional example or piece of evidence that supports your argument. It must go into one of your paragraphs. It must be the similar size of a document package. So we're talking, 4 or 5 sentences here, and it has to support your argument. It has to build on your argument, and it's just not something that was in the document. In the documents, excuse me. And that's this one. And then lastly, this is complex understanding. So the way to do complex understanding, again, we talked about is our little awkward acronym, BMCT75. And so we want to do that when we do our complex understanding. And there's 2 ways to execute this, to actually do this. It will most frequently be in additional paragraphs. So if the question is, was it 30 Years' War more political or more religious? You're going to have 2 paragraphs on political, and then one of your paragraphs is going to be complex understanding paragraph, and that's going to be on how it was religious. Question is, describe the similarities or describe the differences between Russian Revolution and French Revolution? You're going to have 2 paragraphs on the differences and 1 saying, here are the similarities. Now, the other way is that it could be analysis within the paragraphs. You could be building that within paragraphs. I think you'll often see that more with the thematic or with the connections. Although both thematic and connections can be a separate paragraph also. I don't think it's impossible to do within your body paragraphs. I just think it's more challenging. And then lastly is your conclusion. You're going to restate your thesis and just wrap up your essay. It's going to be real short. Get in, get out, quit messing about, and go, go, go. Lastly, I have some tips from me, some tips from the College Board, and then some common mistakes. Biggest tips for me are make frequent references to the terms of the question. Use the words that they give you in the question. They want to see those, and it makes it a lot easier for the reader to figure out what your argument is. Your grammar and spelling should be accurate, should be adequate. It doesn't have to be great. It doesn't have to be perfect. Don't misspell words that are in the documents. Don't misspell common words and names, but it doesn't have to be perfect. The readers are reading this really fast. Don't use the following words. Don't say I, you, we, stuff, things, or huge. You just sound not smart, and you are smart, so let it come across. No complexity in the documents. Do some of the documents contradict each other? Are there connections between them? Do you see a change over time in the documents? The documents will always go in chronological order from earliest to most recent. Do you see a change in time? Are there ambiguities, subtleties? How do the documents complement each other? Looking for those things really shows the reader that you paid attention and you understand these things. Tips from the College Board. So these are some edited versions of their tips in the years past. Primary purpose is to evaluate ability to formulate, support, and answer from documentary sources. No kidding. Documents are chosen both on the basis of their information they convey and the perspective they offer on other documents. Thus, the fullest understanding of any particular document only emerges when it's viewed in relation to the others. That's a big point. Seeing how they go together is really helpful. There is no single correct response. Instead, various approaches are possible depending on your ability to understand the documents and judge their significance. How you use the document is going to impact the way you answer the question. There's not any one right answer. There's wrong answers, but there's a lot of right answers. It's an exercise in both analysis and synthesis. You first had to read and analyze the documents individually, then plan and construct a response to the essay questions based on interpretation of the documents and synthesize that evidence. There are no irrelevant or deliberately misleading documents. Some may be more central to understanding the topic than others, but all of them are related to the question and can be used to answer the question. They're not trying to fool you. Okay, I promise you, no matter what the docs say, they're not trying to. They have a path in mind that they're trying to lead you down, but it's just one of multiple paths that you can take. In general, essays may contain errors that don't detract from the overall quality as long as the historical context is accurate. So if you're talking about the French Revolution and you say 1989 instead of 1789, but everything around that is correct, the reader's not going to be like, this person's an idiot, they don't know when the French Revolution was. They're going to just assume you wrote the wrong number. Grammatical errors will not be counted against the student unless they obscure from the argument. If I can't tell what you're trying to say, then that's going to count against you. So the crucial skill that readers are looking for in students' approach documents is awareness that the documents are not statements of fact, but they're descriptions, interpretations, or opinions of events and developments made by particular people at particular places and times for specific reasons. Again, none of these are the truth. They're interpretations. Last part here, common mistakes, not answering the question. We talked about that. Not actually using the docs or only summarizing them. That's not what we want. You have to use them to make your argument. Failing to analyze the documents or determine their significance. Treating them all as equal value, absolute truth, or not noting biases. It should get to a point after you do this for a while that when you're reading documents, you're automatically thinking about that. Like, what is this person's agenda? What is this person trying to get at? We do it when we read the news now. We do it when you listen to interviews. We should do it with historical documents as well. Fail you use all or all but one of the docs. You should use all of the docs. And then from the College Board, most common errors in student responses include failing to read the instructions, failing to respond to all parts of the question, simply paraphrasing summary documents, failing to integrate documents within the essay, failing to answer the questions being asked, failing to bring in outside content, failing to analyze the documents, determine significance or point of view. So like all of the things you got to do. I have a rubric here that's a generic rubric for us that is just kind of for any particular DBQ. When we look at the rubric for DBQs, which we don't do all the time, there will be specific issues or specific qualifications and standards for each individual DBQ. So I hope that was helpful. I'm glad we finally figured it out and got to it. And then, hopefully College Board won't make any changes on this for 6 to 8 months or so. All right, later.